October 2015. Palo Alto, California. A single Wall Street Journal article lands like a bomb. It questions the blood testing technology behind a company valued at $9 billion. The founder dismisses it as tabloid journalism. Investors stay loyal, and the board stays quiet. But the cracks are already forming. Within months, the illusion collapses. No breakthrough technology, no working device, just deception, intimidation, and belief. This wasn't a tech failure. It was a human one, and it fooled nearly everyone. This is the story of Theranos. The pitch was intoxicating. One drop of blood from a finger prick, hundreds of diagnostic tests, results in hours. It sounded affordable, accessible, and it was definitely revolutionary. The promise was to democratize healthcare. Who could say no to that? By 2015, Theranos had raised over $700 million. The company was valued at $9 billion, making Holmes the youngest self-made female billionaire in America. Soon after, recognition followed. Forbes put her on the cover. President Obama appointed her to the Presidential Ambassadors for Global Entrepreneurship Initiative. The technology, she claimed, was being used by the US military in combat zones. Everything looked perfect, but none of it was true. Elizabeth Holmes was 19 when she dropped out of Stanford in 2003. Before then, she spent one summer at a Singapore lab testing for SARS. One patent filed. Then she left school and founded Real-Time Cures. Later, she renamed it Theranos, a combination of therapy and diagnosis. Holmes deliberately cultivated the Steve Jobs image. Black turtlenecks daily. Deep, unnatural voice. The same advertising agency Apple used. Meetings on Wednesdays, the same day Jobs preferred. Her charisma was magnetic. Large, unblinking blue eyes. Absolute conviction. First, they think you're crazy. Then they fight you. And then you change the world. But Holmes had no medical training. No laboratory science background. Stanford medical professors, including Phyllis Gardner, told her the technology was impossible. She found one believer, Channing Robertson, her engineering professor. He joined her board and opened doors to venture capitalists. Early investors came through family connections. Tim Draper, father of her childhood friend, wrote a $1 million check. Larry Ellison invested early. By 2014, Theranos had raised $400 million. The investors weren't scientists. They were businessmen, attracted by vision and confidence. In Silicon Valley, belief is currency. Theranos claimed its Edison device could run over 200 blood tests using drops from a finger prick. This was the breakthrough, the justification for everything. But the Edison didn't work. Engineers spent years on microfluidics technology. They failed. So they pivoted to a modified glue-dispensing robot from New Jersey. They attached a pipette and programmed it to mimic a lab technician. The device was unreliable. Error rates far exceeded medical standards. So Theranos used commercial machines from Siemens and other companies to run most tests. They modified these machines to work with smaller blood samples. Even this produced inaccurate results. Internal emails show employees raising alarms. Lab directors warned patients could be harmed. Some tests returned false positives. Others missed critical conditions. Publicly, Holmes claimed the technology worked perfectly, and people believed her. Theranos assembled an impressive board. George Shultz and Henry Kissinger, former secretaries of state. James Mattis, retired Marine General. William Perry, former Defense Secretary. Sam Nunn and Bill Frist, former senators. Prestigious names. Zero medical experience. The board existed for show, not oversight. Meetings were brief. Directors received limited information. They relied entirely on Holmes's assurances. George Shultz became Holmes's most devoted defender. When his grandson Tyler worked at Theranos and tried to expose the fraud, George sided with Holmes. He believed her over his family. This wasn't incompetence. It was structural failure. The board was never equipped to perform its duty, and its structure ensured Holmes retained effective control over decision-making. This wasn't governance. It was theater. Theranos operated on fear. Employees who raised concerns were fired. The company used aggressive NDAs. It hired expensive lawyers to intimidate whistleblowers. Tyler Shultz joined in 2013. He quickly saw the technology didn't work. Test results were inconsistent. Quality control was non-existent. He reported concerns internally. Nothing changed. So he contacted regulators and Wall Street Journal reporter John Carreyrou. Erica Chung, another whistleblower, described a culture of paranoia. Employees couldn't discuss their work. Teams were siloed to prevent anyone from seeing the full picture. When Carreyrou investigated, Holmes tried to kill the story. She contacted Rupert Murdoch, who owned the journal's parent company and had invested $125 million in Theranos. Murdoch refused to interfere. Holmes hired David Boies to threaten legal action. The intimidation failed. Carreyrou had sources, documents, and proof. The media worshipped Elizabeth Holmes. Fortune, Forbes, Inc., the New York Times Magazine. She gave a TED Talk. She spoke alongside Bill Clinton. Journalists rarely questioned her claims. They didn't ask to see the technology. They didn't demand verification. The narrative was too compelling. Two partners bet everything on that narrative: Walgreens and Safeway. Walgreens signed a partnership in 2012, rushing to beat CVS to the market. They didn't conduct proper due diligence. Theranos opened dozens of wellness centers in Arizona and California. But the tests didn't work. Patients received false results. Some were told they had conditions they didn't have. Others got false reassurance. By 2016, Walgreens ended the partnership and sued for $140 million. Safeway was worse. CEO Steve Bird became a true believer after meeting Holmes in 2010. Safeway spent $350 million remodeling stores for Theranos clinics. The technology never materialized. The beta test at a Safeway employee clinic showed inaccurate results. Bird dismissed concerns. When he retired in 2013, his successors killed the partnership. Safeway never recovered its investment. Two major corporations committed hundreds of millions without verifying anything. They trusted the story over the evidence. John Carreyrou wasn't looking for Theranos. The story found him. In February 2015, Carreyrou, an investigative reporter at the Wall Street Journal, received a tip from a pathologist who ran a medical blog. The pathologist had read a New Yorker profile of Holmes and was skeptical of her claims. The pathologist connected Carreyrou to a source, a former Theranos lab director who alleged the company was conducting fraudulent testing. Carreyrou made contact. The former lab director described a company that operated outside regulatory standards, generated false results, and knowingly put patients at risk. Carreyrou spent months corroborating the story. He spoke to more than a dozen former employees. He obtained internal emails, validation reports, and test results. He consulted independent laboratory experts. Every source confirmed the same thing. The technology didn't work. Holmes and Theranos fought back hard. They hired legal teams to threaten Carreyrou and his sources. They claimed the investigation was based on disgruntled ex-employees with axes to grind. Holmes personally called Carreyrou and berated him. She contacted Rupert Murdoch, hoping he would kill the story. Murdoch, to his credit, told her he wouldn't interfere with the journal's editorial independence. On October 15, 2015, Carreyrou published his first article. Hot startup Theranos has struggled with its blood test technology. The article revealed that Theranos was using commercial machines for most of its tests, not its proprietary Edison devices. It detailed quality control failures and inaccurate results. The next day, Holmes appeared on CNBC's Mad Money. Jim Cramer asked her about the article. She dismissed it. This is what happens when you work to change things. First, they think you're crazy. Then they fight you. And then all of a sudden, you change the world. The world wasn't changing. It was watching. Carreyrou continued publishing. Article after article. Each one revealed more deception. The company's claims about military use? False. The claim about running 200 tests? Exaggerated. The partnerships? Collapsing. In 2018, Carreyrou published a book, Bad Blood: Secrets and Lies in a Silicon Valley Startup. It became a bestseller and the definitive account of Theranos' rise and fall. The collapse was swift. In January 2016, the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services inspected Theranos' lab in Newark, California. Inspectors found serious deficiencies, unqualified staff, inadequate procedures, and faulty equipment. In July 2016, CMS banned Holmes from owning or operating a clinical laboratory for 2 years. Theranos appealed. The ban stood. That same month, Walgreens terminated its partnership and closed all Theranos wellness centers. By 2017, Theranos was hemorrhaging money and credibility. The company voided nearly 1 million test results. Patients in Arizona were refunded. The state of Arizona filed suit and won a $4.65 million settlement. In March 2018, the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission charged Holmes and former Theranos president Ramesh Sunny with massive fraud. The SEC alleged that they raised more than $700 million from investors by lying about the technology, revenue, and military contracts. Holmes settled the SEC's civil charges without admitting or denying wrongdoing. She paid a $500,000 fine, returned 18.9 million shares to the company, and accepted a 10-year ban from serving as an officer or director of a public company. But criminal charges followed. In June 2018, a federal grand jury indicted Holmes and Balwani on 9 counts of wire fraud and 2 counts of conspiracy to commit wire fraud. The charges alleged 2 schemes, one to defraud investors and one to defraud doctors and patients. Holmes's trial began in August 2021. She testified in her own defense for 7 days. She claimed she had been misled by her staff. She claimed Balwani, her former romantic partner, had controlled and abused her. The jury didn't buy it. On January 3rd, 2022, Holmes was convicted on 4 counts. 3 counts of wire fraud against investors and 1 count of conspiracy to commit wire fraud. She was acquitted on charges related to defrauding patients. The jury couldn't reach a verdict on 3 other counts. On November 18th, 2022, Holmes was sentenced to 11 years and 3 months in federal prison. She was also ordered, along with Balwani, to pay $452 million in restitution to victims. Holmes reported to federal prison Camp Bryan in Texas on May 30th, 2023. Her projected release date is 2032, reduced for good behavior. Balwani was tried separately. In July 2022, he was convicted on all 12 counts of fraud. He was sentenced to nearly 13 years in prison. Theranos formally dissolved in September 2018. The company's remaining cash and assets were distributed to creditors. Theranos wasn't just a corporate fraud. It was a system failure, and the lessons go far beyond one company. Lesson 1. Charisma is not competence. Elizabeth Holmes was a brilliant storyteller, convincing, charismatic, relentless. But storytelling is not science. Silicon Valley worships founders. It celebrates vision and disruption. But vision without evidence is delusion. Ambition without accountability is dangerous. Holmes exploited this. She knew confidence could trump credentials. Belief could substitute for proof. Lesson 2. Venture capital blind spots. Theranos raised over $700 million from sophisticated investors. No one verified that the technology worked. Why? The company operated in stealth mode, claiming trade secret protection. Investors accepted this. But this was a medical device company. The stakes were human lives, not engagement metrics. Venture capital is built on risk, but risk requires diligence, and diligence requires skepticism. Lesson 3. Governance theater. Theranos' board was world-class on paper, but it was designed to impress, not govern. Relevant expertise, infrequent meetings, limited information, no challenge to management. Real oversight requires independence, expertise, and access to information. Theranos had none. Lesson 4. Why disruption bypassed skepticism. Silicon Valley loves disruption narratives. Young founder, bold vision, challenging the establishment. But disruption is not a license to lie. Innovation is not an excuse for recklessness. Theranos operated in a regulated industry. Blood testing impacts patient health. Mistakes kill. Yet, the company bypassed normal skepticism. Journalists didn't verify. Partners didn't validate. Regulators acted too late. Why? The disruption narrative was seductive. People wanted to believe Holmes was the next Steve Jobs. But Jobs disrupted consumer electronics. Holmes played with people's lives. Theranos proved that in Silicon Valley, belief can outperform reality. Charisma can substitute for competence. Narrative can replace evidence. But only for a while. Eventually, reality reasserts itself. The technology either works or it doesn't. The results are accurate, or they aren't. Theranos collapsed because the truth couldn't be hidden forever. John Carreyrou exposed it. Tyler Schultz and Erica Chung risked everything to reveal it. Regulators finally enforced it. But the damage was done. Patients received false results. Investors lost hundreds of millions. Trust in innovation was shaken. And the system that enabled Theranos, it's still in place. Venture capital still prioritizes growth over scrutiny. Boards still prioritize prestige over oversight. The media still celebrates charismatic founders without demanding proof. The question isn't just what happened at Theranos, it's what happens next. Will we demand accountability from founders, investors, and regulators? Will we insist on evidence before belief? Or will we wait for the next Elizabeth Holmes to tell us a story we want to hear? Theranos proved that a lie, told with enough conviction, can fool the smartest people in the world. The real question is, will we let it happen again?